Hey there friends, Cynthia here in my quilt lab where I am working on this lovely block of the month named Symphony. It is by Banyan Batiks by Northcott, the lovely designers of Linda Hahn and Deborah Stanley Frog Hollow Designs. Thank you ladies for this awesome pattern. It is month number 9. That's right, we're getting so close to the end. We're in the last third, the home stretch as it were. Let's jump in and see what month number 9 has in store for us. Let's go. Come on, let's go. All right, so month number 9 is called the Double Star, and you'll look, I'll have one of these blocks completely done. It's one of the big blocks. You'll see both this one and in the next month are nice big blocks, and they're actually pretty similar when it comes down to it. The block is basically 2 blocks that are then mirrored and inverted on the bottom. So you'll see that the top left and the bottom right are the same, and conversely the top right, bottom left are the same. You can see them over here on the side. There's the 2 different panels. One of them's called block 9A and the other one's called block 9B. So you're going to be making 4 of these. Just wanted to show it in its entirety before we break it down, because you're only going to be seeing a quarter of these as I jump into talking about piecing. So yeah, let's pull out the little pieces and talk about that. All right, so here's my exploded version of the diagram that you'll see in your notebook and your instructions. I'm actually working on one of the 9As for that second block. So there's one of them finished, and there's the 2 9Bs that I'm going to need for that finished block. So I'm just going to put these aside. The only difference between the 2, let me just point that out real quick, is you'll see that that middle piece is the darker blue in the B, whereas it's the same color in the A. So that's the only thing that you need to worry about there as far as those 2. I will give you the tip of, hey, label all your fabrics. It's going to be really important when you go to start making half square triangles, not just here, but especially in the next block. So a little spoiler for month 10. But I keep everything labeled until I get ready to take it to the machine. And that's because some of these fabrics are actually pretty close to being similar. And I want you to make sure that you're not cutting the wrong fabric so they don't make the wrong block. Second tip is please make sure that you're pressing everything nice and flat. Get some best press, get some starch, because it's going to make cutting that batik fabric much easier. And the more precise cutting you have, the more precise piecing you will get. So you can see here is my lovely little layout. It looks a little something like this in the instructions. So you can see there's fabric number 9, those 2 corners. There's fabric number 5. Fabric number 5 is repeated. There's a full square. You're going to be making a half square triangles with fabric 13. And then it's in the 2 corners as well, and next to that darker fabric. So you'll see there's fabric 5 all along those 2 edges. Something good to remember. Let's see, the only other fabric I haven't talked about is fabric number 11, which is also put onto that dark fabric right there as a kind of a half squared triangle-ish rectangle. Lots of fun stuff to talk about. The first thing you're going to want to do is we're going to be putting these piece blocks together first before we can put the block together. I suggest sticking with the instructions and doing that half square triangle with the fabric 5 and the fabric 13. These are the bigger size squares, and we've talked about this before. You're going to place the 2 squares. So there's fabric 5 and fabric 13. I've put the lines down the middle and 1 on each side. It's a 1/4 of an inch each side. I just used my little 1/4 half square triangle ruler. If you don't have one of these, I'll put this in the description below. You can just use your regular ruler. Do that diagonal line and then do 1 line on either side. I like drawing all 3. That way I know where I'm going to be sewing, which is the solid on either side of the middle, and where I'm going to be cutting later, which is that middle diagonal. Place these on top of one another. Go and do the stitches either side of that middle line. cut down that middle line, and then what you're going to want to do is press them open and then square them down to that same size as the smaller ones, which is a 2.5. Remember, because that's a 3-inch, it's going to be a little bit bigger, which is nice because if your 1/4 inch isn't all that great, you have wiggle room to make it the right size. So let me take this to the machine. I'll take a few pictures, of course, as I go, and I'll see you in just a moment. Alright, so like I mentioned, these are going to be a little bit bigger than what we need, so I'm just going to show you what I do when I trim half square triangles down to the size that we need. I'm just going to move one out of the way. So we know that this guy needs to be 2.5. And if you have a rotating mat, now is a great time to grab it, but I will show you what you can do without one. I have a ruler that has a 45-degree line across the middle of it, and what I like to do is like to put that line right on top of the two sides. So that's the half square. Put it right on top, and I'm just eyeballing to make sure it needs to be 2.5, and I'm making sure that I have fabric outside both the two edges, but also outside the 2.5 lines on the inside of the ruler. Once I have things situated the way I want it, and I have my ruler placed nicely, and I'm going to have excess all the way around. Put my hand down nice and firmly, I grab my rotary cutter, and I do two sides. There we go, and those two sides are done. So now if you had the rotary mat, you just rotate your rotary mat, but I'll just pick this up here and we can do the other side. Same thing. Now I have 3 sides that I can line things up on. There's that diagonal right on top of the diagonal line. There's the 2.5 right there, and there's the 2.5 line right there. Once it looks good, put my hand down, making sure my fingers are not close to that edge. We don't want any accidents, and then swipe, swipe. There we go. And this is just a reminder that if you are pressing down really hard on your rotary cutter, it is time for a new blade. Safety first, close it. All right, do that to both of them, and then let's get back to piecing that rectangle block. All right, back to the exploded block here. There's our 2 half square triangles. Oops. Let's get them facing the right way. There we go. There we go. There's the 2 9s and there's the 5. So those 5 blocks are done until we put things together. Let's talk about these 2 rectangle pieces. You're going to have a fabric 5 and a fabric 11. Now I've already pre-drawn a diagonal line across all 4 pieces. And you'll notice in the picture that they're going to be like mirror images of each other once they're finished, okay? So let me pull out this one. So you see how the one here on the right, the cream is off to the right, but the one here at the bottom, the cream is off towards that left. So you'll see they're mirror images. So you want to make sure that when you're putting the blocks together that you're not making 2 of the same. You're making mirror images of each other. This is why I like to lay everything out before I take it to the machine so that I know what I'm going to be doing. So let's just talk about this bottom one right here. I'll move everything aside so you can see it a little better. So this is going to be the bottom one. So there's my 2 diagonals. I'm going to do one piece at a time. I'm going to lay that fabric 5 up here at the top. I'm going to throw a pin in real quick just to make sure it doesn't go anywhere on my way to the machine. And I'm going to stitch right on top. Put it over here, right on top of that diagonal line. So that way, when I cut away this extra and this gets pressed open, it's still going to be that same rectangle shape. Then I do the other side, right? Making sure the diagonal is going into the correct direction, stitch, cut away, and then press out so that the piece is going to look like that. The rectangle piece should be the same size both before the triangles are put in and after the triangles are put in. So that gives you that kind of parallelogram that we got going on there in the middle. So remember, one's going one direction, the other is going the opposite direction. Let me do these. I'll take a few pictures as I go, and I'll see you at the end with 2 finished rectangles. Okay, back to the exploded block. Now that the 2 rectangle pieces are done, let's talk about putting this into one full block itself. The instructions have you combine these 4 first to make a block there. And I'll do rows, of course, and then attach the rows together. I'm going to press towards that bigger block, even though this is a lighter one. I didn't have a whole lot of problems seeing see-through. And the reason I'm pressing towards there is because I don't have to deal with this being folded over. Just makes my life a little easier. You know me, I like to make sure my blocks are nice and flat. After that little 4 patch is done, it gets combined to this rectangle over here. Let's move to the bottom. We're going to put this square next to that rectangle. And if I press towards that way and this way at the bottom, it means it'll nest up here in the center. Or you can open these seams up and you can match the open seam up. I've done it both ways, and I don't really have a preference as far as which one I like, so we'll see what happens this time. See how the fabric speaks to me. Once it's all done, it's pressed and ready to go. So that's a lot of steps. Let me take a bunch of pictures as I go, and I'll come back to you with a finished block. To the machine. Alright, so once you have 2 of the block A's done and 2 of the block B's done, you can make the full block. So in the picture it looks a little something like this. There we go. So you'll see it's got a little checkerboard here in the center, and there's that stripe of gray going through. That's something that the instructions points out, so I'm just pointing it out as well. So as you can imagine, we're going to put these 4 blocks together in rows, and then we'll put them together as one failed block. So you have a couple of options here as far as pressing. You can decide to press towards the block A or the block B so that it'll nest up in the center, or you can open up these seams and then open up that seam too, just to cut down a little bit of the bulkage. And as you can see here, that's what I decided to do. I opened all of those seams up. I will give a little tip that if you're planning on doing that as well, give a little back stitch at the beginning and the end of these blocks. I know we don't do that a whole lot in quilting, but go ahead and do that. It'll help just make sure that the seam doesn't split open when you go to match those seams up there in the center. All right, just like normal, I'll take a few pictures as I go, and I'll see you at the end with another finished block. To the machine. And there we go. There's one, and there's number 2. So you're making 2 of these lovely blocks. A really big block. And we have another really big block coming in next month. So I hope that you will stick around and join me. And if you found this video educational or entertaining, please give me a thumbs up. Like, share, and subscribe, as they say, and I will see you next time in my quilt lab. And as always, keep quilting. Bye-bye.